So I'm going to talk about hidden owners, shining a light on UK corporate ownership. So this is using public data. This is actually nothing to do with my day job. This is me doing charity data science work. I'm going to try and hit on a number of things in the course of the talk. I'm going to try and give you the idea behind it. I'm going to try and encourage you to engage with charitable works. I'm going to, if anybody's, who here has ever used Neo4j? I'm going to give a bit of a little demo intro so that if you've never used it, you can see how you could get started on it, but do not expect to see anything advanced. And then I'm going to get through some of the actual outcomes of the projects and some of the lessons learned. You've kind of had a quick intro to me. I am currently a senior data scientist at HAL24K. We're building smart city solutions. I'm also a volunteer, an ambassador, and currently a committee member for DataKind, which is the charity that links to this project. I'm now also a Royal Society Entrepreneur in Residence. So I'm meant to be trying to bring best practice from data science industry back into academic environments. If anybody's got any actual good ideas on how to do that, I managed to blag it, so they've given me the position for the next 2 years, but we'll see what I come up with. And then just me in my musings. There's my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn. Horsewithapointyhat.com is a very, very badly written blog because I haven't written anything for about 7 months, so I need to start doing stuff. Again. And in part, actually, it times nicely with this is when I got linked into this project. So the results you're about to hear about are from collaboration between DataKind and an NGO called Global Witness. Who here has heard of DataKind? Great. Who here has volunteered with DataKind? That is not so good. So for those of you who don't know, DataKind is a charity that, well, I'll get shot if I say we're a matchmaking service between data scientists and charities, because we do a lot more than that. The idea is really to try and get the tech sector to do pro bono work like the legal sector traditionally kind of has. So the idea is to find deserving causes that can make our societies and worlds a better place, who generally can't afford data scientists or don't know whether they can or whether they should, and so they join together with DataKind to do different projects on a variety of different scales. You can hit me up afterwards if you want to hear more details about that. Those of you, who saw my lightning talk on DataKind stuff last year's PyData? Okay, a couple of people. Good. That means that I won't be going over too much familiar ground. We did a dive originally, so a weekend hackathon that was on a snapshot of data. That was so successful that we ended up doing a full 7-8 month project, which is what you're about to hear about. So this is a real deep drill down. A team of 5 of us worked with the charity to try and build a tool that would help them out. So it's, these things are called data core projects, since I hadn't mentioned that. So what we wanted to do was the UK is actually a world leader in corporate transparency, if you can believe it, to some degree. They are the first country in the world to require companies, when they do their filings, to report who controls them. Now, the only way you can report another company is controlling you now is if that company is also registered in the UK, because they have to report who controls them. And so the idea is that ultimately it will always end in people. And so there is no hiding behind shell corporations. You will be able to get to the bottom of who is actually controlling the interests and operating the companies. So the UK is the first country to actually do this, and this is why it's also so new. The goals of over the project was we wanted to demonstrate the value and usability of this data, because there are other countries who say, oh, we can't do this because it would be impossible to do anything with it and nobody would report things properly. And so there's an issue of how well has this worked. Companies House also, when initially approached by this, said, our data's perfect. Yeah, it's not. So we expected to uncover problems with the data, and we did. We also then wanted to actually start looking at what corporate control looked like and actually start linking into data science methodologies to help as we already heard yesterday in a similar talk in the keynote, if you were there, investigative journalism. Actually using these tools, these transparencies, these public open releases of data to actually drive social change through the media and through investigative journalism. So, how are we going to do this? Well, we need data. I've already said, so the majority of the data comes out of Companies House. The techniques we're going to apply, I've already mentioned Neo, we're going to graph all of the data. And this is fundamentally the key tools that we ended up actually linking everything together whilst we were working on this project. Neo was going to be basically the back end, that's what was going to host and run and serve all of the data once we constructed our graph. This is PyData, so need to make sure I use Python somewhere in this. Python is actually my tool of choice, so that's kind of where I ended up connecting to the database and actually cleaning and processing the data and pushing things through. We were also using notebooks. One of our team, one sole member of our team was an R user, and he did some great work, but yes, I'm not that hot on my R. Maybe I need to get a bit better, but we were sharing ideas and doing some exploration. All of it was hosted on AWS through DataKind servers and pandas because these were big tables of stuff started getting used quite heavily for doing certain things. Although after yesterday's talk, I'm starting to realize why some of it's as slow as it is because I'm not using pandas properly. Or pandas is not designed to do the things that I was doing. So one of the other things, I've said Companies House is the data source. Fortunately, a number of the things you can actually get as massive big data files. Depends on whether you like that or not. You can actually download a list of all active companies in the UK. And I think they update it monthly. And it is about 4.6 million companies. So that is, when decompressed, a 3 gigabyte CSV file. So you can start to see why when I first loaded it all into pandas in one go on my 8 gig laptop, it started running slow. Some things, sorry?
I'm a bit behind on this. This isn't the thing you have to pay £1 for.
This isn't. So, well, I think there are some things that they can charge if, I mean, there are old school stuff I remember seeing where you want this on a DVD posted to you, they start charging you money. There are a number, this is kind of, as you can see, I think there's a beta written at the top of here. A number of these things are now fully open. So the beneficial open ownership data is also available as a great big giant data dump. If you start wanting to get deeper, which we did, which is why we partnered with some other organizations, because they'd done stuff, you can get things like the company officers and directors. But that's only available via the API, and that is rate limited. So you're actually then going to, you need to either be doing this long term to pull it all down and to maintain it, or you need to negotiate with them, in which case they may start charging if you need to do something really clever. Like I say, we partnered in part with a few other people who already had built some of these data collections, which made it easier for us to just get in and start exploring. But I wanted to make a point of the API, because you can actually get all of the data from the API, but then you're on the rate limit. So it's sensible to find the ones where you can get the big data files, just download it within a couple of minutes, and only go to the API when you need the specifics. So how are we going to do this? So this was, for my sins, my master plan. I'm now trying to allude to the Marvel universe to obfuscate and not, try and claim there's any dodgy dealings going on anywhere. I should give a very good keynote. Anything you see today is not claiming any impropriety in anything, because I haven't done any of the investigative journalism. That's not my role. So whilst things are like, ooh, that's interesting, that should be followed up, nothing you see, which is why you generally will not see any real names or anything up there, is any way indicative of things being illegal, fraudulent, or anything. I'm telling you that now, so I can't get sued. I am not saying that, and that is not implied. So in this case, what we're doing is so each colored circle is going to be a node in the database. So we have nodes, and we have then relationships, or edges, however you want to call them. And they are labeled. So we have, in the sort of pinky orange color, we have the people, and we have J. Jonah Jameson, who controls the Daily Bugle in New York City. Companies are now in blue, and companies can also control companies, as I said. This is possible. So actually, there's a parent company I've created now called the Daily Bugle, which owns the New York branch. It's also controlled by somebody called J. Jameson. And we'll see this as we go through. We now have a problem, because how do we know that these are the same person? Might be a problem, we'll see. And these companies are registered in the UK. Now, anybody who knows anything about Spider-Man and the Marvel Universe knows that Norman Osborn, also the Green Goblin, is not a nice person. And in this case, I've gone and made him resident of the British Virgin Islands, where he's probably avoiding paying his taxes properly. He controls a company called Oscorp, but Oscorp actually has control of the Daily Bugle. So if you're following the money, is it that actually all the money is being funneled out, and then it's because it's registered out in the Cayman Islands as well, that actually we're avoiding, we've heard a lot about tax avoidance and, money being filtered through inappropriate places, and that's part of the point here. I didn't really mention what Global Witness did as an NGO. They are generally looking for where people and resources around the world are being exploited, and their history of figuring that out is about following the money. And so this is why they wanted to investigate transparency and things like this, so that you can actually start to see where people are abusing power or are not playing by the rules, and so on and so forth. So this is the concept. Now, spoiler alert, that's what actually my graph database ends up looking like. Unsurprisingly, it looks like I designed it. But nicely, you can kind of see that it's doing the same thing. So we have created people. We've created companies. They can be linked by controlling relationships. Companies can control companies. We've also linked in where they're registered, where their postcodes are, what countries they're also registered in, what countries people are citizens of. We also then have sort of other nodes that are holding their control kind. This enables us to more easily jump in, because the power of the graph database is that it is, if you've indexed on it, it's cheap to find your starting nodes, and then you can just walk the graph to look for the patterns you want. So if you can find those key nodes, then you've got your starting points, and then you can navigate around to find the pattern that you want. Now, for those who've never, this is going to be interesting to see how this works, never used Neo and would like to play with it and would like to experiment with it, I would say the community edition is free. I have never paid for Neo4j, which I'm sure Mark over in the corner is a little bit disappointed about. I've only ever used it for side fun projects and for charity work and so on and so forth. If you're not looking for a full enterprise, scaled, sharded, doing the really clever stuff, and you're just playing with relatively small graphs, I mean, I say relatively small. This graph is about 60 gig when it finally gets built. Then the community edition is a great place to get in and play with stuff. And one of the things that I love that they created the other year, and we're going to see if this actually, will this play? How do I make you play? Ooh. Oh, here we go. They created a sandbox. They created a place where you can go and spin up a Neo4j server, and I'm actually going to show you exactly how to do it. So you just search for Neo4j sandbox. You'll get there pretty quick sharp. Here you go. I'm going to log in. I've already got an account, so I'm going to use my GitHub credentials. That's going to get me in. And, oh, great. I can come in, knows who I am. They actually have a load pre-populated, so you can get pre-built data sets. What you saw there was me creating a blank one. And you'll see it takes a minute. Oh, no, it's coming up. And by default, this lasts for 3 days. And then it will just shut itself down and delete itself. So you don't even have to worry about maintaining it. It'll come any second now. Which is ironic. I'm waiting. I had control of the video. I could have cut this down, but I thought I'd give you a realistic timescale. Come on. And here we go. There you go. It started. And the tabs then give you, when I click on that one, there's the connection details. That's how to go and link in. And then once it's built, it'll actually give you summaries of the data model and code and other things. And you can share that even with other people so that you can collectively work on things. So let's build a graph. So like I say, very quick intro. There's a native Bolt driver, which will allow you to connect from Python, maintained by the lovely people at Neo4j. So you don't have, there are other third-party tools like Py2Neo, which you can use. I actually like to just get in and just use their driver because it's really fast, it's really efficient. Use that, put in some credentials. Those are actually the ones of this little 3-day demo that's up on the server, so you could connect if you really want to. Right now, you probably don't. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a node here, well, a path. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a person, it's going to connect them. This is actually from the Neo4j website, you may guess. Works at Neo4j, so does this other person over here. And so you actually suddenly, you get that, and then there's an example that I clean everything back out at the end. I had hoped, I wasn't good enough in doing this, I had hoped to have like a nice mini full-on demo tutorial that would go with this, that you could all go away and you could build your own mini snapshot of the PSC data, not giving you all 4.6 million companies a smaller, more manageable set, and then you could play with this. This notebook, which does this little demo and the next demo, exists on GitHub at that link. And I promise, if this video gets to more than 800 views on the channel, because that's more than Emlyn currently has from his video from last year, I will guarantee that I will finish that tutorial. No plug there whatsoever. So that's all great. In the context of our graph, as I said, one of the important things is being able to actually find the starting nodes and actually putting some restraints on it. So this one is in there as an example that I'm going to make sure that companies are all unique, so I don't double up on companies. The same for people and postcodes. By making them unique, I'm also kind of indexing on them at the same time. Do not index on everything. It's something, again, I've learned from going to Neo4j meetups that that's a bad idea. Think about how you're intending to query it. This is basically us, how we locked it down of what we knew we needed it to work on. And then this is another little example. As you saw, we need to be able to connect to countries, because this is kind of an important thing if you're starting to look for, is there something maybe suspicious happening, because there are certain known countries in the world which are not the ones that we're most friendly with or aren't the most restrictive in their tax declaration rules or so on and so forth. And so that was an important one. We actually built this effectively using the ISO country codes. I built my own JSON file of it, and then I started mapping the way that the data is structured over, hence why I tried to keep the, I think I kept the French name as well as the English name in case it came up in places. That one also up there, so you can actually see that the data files are even there, so you can actually create all the countries in the world in your little graph database. It will then not connect to anything because I haven't done any of the other stuff yet. This is where it gets complicated, though, because this, for example, is a snapshot of a load of the fields that come out of your active company register. So what you actually have here are lots of detail, which is great. You've got company name, company number, you've got the registered address components, you have country of origin, you've got company status, you've got if it's been dissolved, so on and so forth. Now, the thing you have to think about is which features here are effectively going to be values that you are going to store as properties on your nodes, and which ones are actually relationships, because you actually want to be able to navigate and work through that and see equivalence connections between data. Because that's where the power of coming from graphs is. You don't want it in a great big table. You want to see the connection between things. And that's why we were doing this, because these are huge tables, and some of the stuff that you see later on, if I get there, you know, it would be very difficult to do this many joins on tables like that to try hunting down patterns that you don't quite know where they're going to end. That you can't read, and I've kind of done it like that because that is the level now of code to create the country nodes and to build the relationships between the, sorry, not the country, the company nodes, to build them and then to connect them to people and that might be listed and to the countries where they're registered and so on and so forth. And you can see that it's a bigger chunk of code than you saw on the other little sample notebook. It requires a bit more thought. The key thing you're coming in here is actually there are 4 things happening. You're building the company, first of all, as a single node. And then I'm taking the company and then I'm mapping it to the countries that it's registered in. So then I'm building the relationship set up there. Then I'm looking at, okay, well, actually, where is it founded? So there's a has origin feature. So again, I can connect it possibly to another country. And then I've got the postcode. When it comes to actually doing the people, that then gets a little bit more complicated because then you're looking at even more places where you can connect things out. So that's about halfway through, so that's not bad. That's kind of the how and the why. I'm a former astronomer, so there's my chance of getting an astronomy photograph in. How have we actually had impact? What has this done? Because it's all well and good building a great big database of stuff, but if you don't use it, What can you do? So one of the things you can do is you can find our PyData colleagues. One of them is sat in the second row at the front. This is Emlyn's corporate ownership network. He's boring.
It's so boring, isn't it? Yeah.
So this is Emlyn. He controls, I can't read it on there. OpenVivo Limited. He is also an officer of OpenVivo Limited. So one of the things I mentioned was we had the officer data. I think there's like 40 million officers and directors. So that is a huge data set, again, to play with. It's good fun. It's registered at this postcode, registered in this country. Yeah, you're an individual, you're a person, you're not a company or a charity, I'm afraid to tell you. And then this purple one over there, the reason why there's no number on that is actually Emlyn is also an officer of a dissolved company. So in my active companies list, I never saw it, hence why I don't have any details about it. Now, if I was kind of interested, the point being is I can still go back in to the company's house data and I can start looking this stuff up because I have a starting point. So, nice little simple beginning point. Nothing contentious there. Either that, or he's very good at hiding what should be contentious.
I'm very pleased to see this result.
What, because you've been trying to obfuscate what you do, or because you don't do anything?
I have questions.
Okay. So what else can we do? And now, to be honest, you could do this just by loading the data in. The point being is that you can do stuff that you would do in a tabular analysis, or you would do just through a normal thing. But you can also effectively start pulling this back out of the graph. For every person in the graph, we created their date of birth. Their date of birth was part of the record, at least their month and year. So we can come up with an age. And apparently 4,000 toddlers are in charge of British companies. Now, I know there are some adult toddlers in charge of companies that we've all encountered. However, there are actually 4,000 beneficial owners under the age of 2. Now, there is a concept that actually that might be legit. You know, maybe they do own more than 25% of the shares in a company that they've been done. But I hope they're not actually executing any kind of control over those companies, or there's possible issues. Interestingly, and this kind of goes back to the data cleanliness comment that I initially made, one of them hasn't been born yet. One of them is actually born in 2021. And this is one of the points of feedback that we actually we have very quickly taken back to Companies House. Companies House does not require you, when you register a company, to provide any identification. There is no identity check. There is nothing. And most of what you put in has historically been a free text box. So you can make mistakes. Maybe you make mistakes on purpose. Who knows? The problem is it's very difficult to audit these things at that point. One of the, I said, we put nationality and citizenship into the graphs. I've seen somebody declare themselves as British with 2 T's. I've seen someone declare themselves Cornish. I hadn't realized they'd seceded from the United Kingdom. And actually, that has gone back to Companies House. I believe they have actually now changed that to no longer be a drop-down box. You have to choose from an allowed set of countries. Now, we're all aware that these things have challenges on the other way. If you're too prescriptive and you haven't thought of all the options, you now cause problems in your registration. But leaving pure free text boxes when you're not doing any validation of who people are, in the context of transparency, doesn't help you that much. Trying to figure out who people are and if they're the same person. There is more than one Emlyn Clay in the country. There is. Fortunately, there isn't another Emlyn Robert Clay, hence you had your own unique thing, and assuming that the other one isn't you. So what other cool stuff did we find? So one of the things that we went looking for is, okay, so based upon these rules of reporting who controls you, it's meant to end at somebody or people. They should not be cyclical. All of those are cyclical. In fact, you've got, here's brilliant. This one controls this one that controls this one that controls this one that controls this one. So, whose fault is something? Who is to blame? Who is responsible? And now, if there are a number of them, which you will see from these little ones down here that look almost like Christmas baubles. Those are people claiming that their company controls their company. And what we probably expect is these are self-employed people who didn't understand what they were registering or how to do the register. So interestingly, that has impact that we've taken back to Companies House of you might want to educate people better in what are you meant to be putting here. However, the company that registered, company 1 controls company 2, that controls company 3, that controls company 4, that controls company 1. When they literally use company name 1, company name 2, company name 3, company name 4, I think they definitely know what they're doing. And they're not doing what they're meant to do. We actually found things like that. You know, they're not even trying to hide it because they know nobody's looking, or nobody has been looking. And so this is starting to now feed into Companies House actually doing some investigations, as well as there's some investigative journalism. I can't give you a load of the juicy stuff because we literally only finished the project like a month ago. And if you're going to do data journalism, the journalists like to get the headline. Not me at a conference surrounded by a load of Python geeks. You'll get something. So you can start to find all sorts of patterns. You can find chains. And like I said, there is nothing wrong with this. There are some, for example, this one over here on the right, I think, there is no person in charge of this network. And that's fine. This is actually something like Reckitt Benexa, so huge, giant, publicly tradable pharmaceutical. So nobody owns more than 25% of the stock. So there is no single controller. And so therefore, actually, that's completely legitimate. But the fact that you can get in and start finding these things is a lot more powerful than the classic way is you just would be finding one piece of paper. Oh, right, they're controlled by this person over here and someone else, and you're trying, you know, the level of complexity comes out of the graph easily. It would not come out of a flat database table in any way, shape, or form as easily as it does here. This was a fun one. Like I said, we map postcodes. So there are a couple of postcodes in London that have like 20,000 companies registered to them. That seems a bit odd. Like I said, it might be fine, it might be legit, but you won't know until you look. And the idea is this is the sort of thing that, again, comes out easily from the graph.
Aren't these just going to be law firms who have off-the-shelf companies?
They may well do. Exactly. That's the point. Is there is nothing illegal about this, but there may be places that aren't entirely, that they, you know, maybe they are a company farm. Yes, they just produce these things, but maybe they get connected to other things. If you found a law firm that was building shell companies for someone, you might want to be investigating that law firm. So the point being is that it comes out really easily. And so this is then just an example. I actually had to cut down. I couldn't do that. I couldn't render that many nodes without breaking my browser. So that's why you just have little mirrors over on the other side, that you just suddenly can see these massive concentrations in certain places. And they may be, if you know something, if you know other information, do this in a very Bayesian way, combine that with something else, and suddenly you have journalistic lead. Problems and things to improve. This graph, which you can't read on the left, is Donald Trump in the UK. And this illustrates, again, the point with data cleanliness. These 4 nodes, green nodes over here, are Donald Trump, Donald J. Trump, Donald John Trump, because, again, you might choose to put your middle name in, you might just put an initial in. And so those, we had to manually create our own unique identifier for people. And you can't do it too coarse, of first and last name, otherwise the number of John Smiths being mapped to being the same person will be horrific. And equally, if you do it at the level that we've done it at, it's not too bad. You do still connect. But we know that this is something to be improved. So we didn't get to this point, but we were suddenly thinking, well, I can Levenshtein distance the unique identifier I've made, and I can look for how close they are connected via companies and controlling relationships in the graph, and maybe that would point me to those look like they might be the same people, and then you might be able to reaggregate. But like I say, it's kind of just an interesting thing, and it's a point that came out of stuff that we could feed back. Impact. The impact has been happening. There is data journalism. There's a lovely piece on File-on-4 that went out in January or February. It's still available online. I would highly encourage you to go and watch 11th of February, 2018. Potter's Bar, Ukraine's stolen billions. So the former Ukrainian president basically managed to swindle a load of money, get a load of money out of the country, went through the UK. And it went through a number of corporate entities in the UK. And some of our analysis then was linking back, not directly on the case, but as a reflection of points of view. There's a nice piece in The Guardian. This is an interesting case, actually. I highly encourage you to read it. Recently, the government, in the last 12, 18 months, trumpeted prosecuting someone for fraudulently creating companies in the UK. Except that person was doing it and creating companies with MPs as owners of those companies without them knowing, and then telling them about it and pointing out the problems with how you can register a company without having to be validated. And then he immediately shut the company down, but then the government chose to prosecute him for illustrating the problem and the ease of fraud. Well, the problem was he self-documented everything really well and then went, yeah, here you go, here's the evidence. And they went, okay, good, yeah, you broke the law. I've been told, actually, that because he pled guilty, he had to pay the government's costs, he had to pay a fine, something like £25,000. I believe it's been crowdfunded that the community have gone with, you know what, he's not paying that. I hope it's been raised. I need to look it up myself. I only heard about this case literally recently. And keep an eye out in the Financial Times tomorrow. Apparently, we have something that, again, has been built off this. I'm finding out about it as quickly as you are. So some of the key early findings that we've got is that there are 4.1 million companies now on the beneficial ownership register. 3.7 million of them have actually declared at least one beneficial owner. So compliance, when it's been argued you can't do this easily, isn't that hard and has been achieved. You've already heard about the ones under the age of 2. There's an issue of Scottish limited partnerships where they tend to have a lot of them are connected to former Soviet countries, which is a much higher fraction than limited companies. And apparently this is, again, a thing that a number of journalists have been using, looking at Scottish limited partnerships and their own rules as to maybe we should investigate here a little bit more. 5 beneficial owners, forget just the postcode mass things, 5 beneficial owners control more than 6,000 companies. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it might be something that people want to look at. So we have ongoing discussions with Companies House. We have been lobbying other governments to adopt open registries. They've actually, some of them have been coming to the charity. There is going to be a white paper report out from Global Witness, which will actually summarize a lot of this. It was meant to be out by today, which is what I was hoping I was going to get all the juicy stuff, but it's been delayed because actually there's so much interest from journalists, they've been doing the journalism. So, like I say, there are things coming out. Keep an eye out. Some of it might be us. Have a check out of the blog post, and there's the link to that Guardian article. Like I said, I'd highly recommend those ones. There's always more to be done, but there are no secrets to success, quoting Colin Powell. It's a result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. Yes, we made lots of mistakes as we did this, but we're also pointing out the errors in some of the other systems, and hopefully it all works to make everything a lot better. And the obligatory slide, whilst this has nothing to do with my day job, we are hiring. If you look in the jobs channel on Slack, you'll see that there's a DevOps data engineer based in Amsterdam. If you want to hear more about the company that I work for in my day job, come and find me. If you want to hear more about volunteering and offering your services to DataKind, either go there and register and we'll start bombarding you with emails, or invite you in for an interview if you want to already just jump onto a project, or you can talk to me. And finally, thank you all for listening.
Hi, thanks for the interesting talk. Are there any plans to link this with Panama Papers? You know, there's a lot of...
So one of the interesting things is the sandbox environment that I demoed. You can spin up the Panama Papers data set in there. And I believe somebody from the charity actually did that. They span up the sandbox and they tried to connect it back to our Neo4j database to map stuff across. I didn't go into all of the stuff that we had because you don't want to get into all of the fine detail. Things like the countries, we've done things like we've mapped financial secrecy audits that have been done on them so that you can find which are the dodgy countries maybe. We've also, I believe, gone and looked at registered politicians around Europe so that you can actually map their identities in and start trying to find. The beautiful thing I loved about this project is that whilst to a degree it wasn't, it was a lot of data engineering. I'm a data scientist. It's my normal day job. I normally am doing the really cool stuff at the other end, some would argue. But I like to dabble. It enables so much more. This is a great foundational piece that can be scaled. And it's the other thing I like about graph database systems is that enriching it with more data isn't that hard. It's you just go in and you start linking it to the other things. So yeah, the idea of using the Panama and the Paradise paper releases, I know that some of the journalists certainly are. Oh, how can we do more with this and connecting things?
There's one more question. So there is a global legal entity ID, right, for companies across.
Is there?
Yeah.
That would have been helpful.
Yeah. So, but I can take it offline. Yeah.
Thank you. I could imagine that time can play a quite big role here, and in particular how sort of relationship develop over time. Imagine, for example, I don't know, the country from where the company is based. Obviously, for the last 200 years, it might just change. And I was wondering your ideas for what you think about how this is going.
It's an interesting component because we are well aware that, because like I said, effectively the registers get updated monthly. At the moment, the plan is just that, so you can rebuild this quite quickly. We've written scripts to just generate it, so it is a static. It's not trying to map changes over time. Mainly low-hanging, there's plenty of work to be done just with the static snapshot. But it's definitely something that we've considered that actually you might want to take it to another level, that you actually track the changes, that this person is no longer a director, they've been dissolved off here. I mean, one of the other data sets is those who are not allowed to be directors and officers of companies anymore. So finding them or finding out, they're no longer the director, but their secretary got promoted to being director after they quit, kind of start to, again, look like there's something not quite right going on there. So a time dimension would be very interesting. Neo is not the best suited for time. I mean, there is no date stamp data type as far as I know still. So there are some tricks that you need to play with to do that. But it's, like I say, it's something interesting. It would be great to invest time in it.
So this problem that you're solving is one that a lot of auditors face. I mean, effectively, if you're auditing a company, identifying the relationships between all of the directors and suppliers and so on is an issue. Are you doing any work with the accountancy sector in general? We
haven't, because, like I say, this has been done purely between a non-profit and a charity group offering data science skills. So we haven't gone there. I think we may have approached somebody that, do you want to... Have you got any team members you'd like to volunteer their time in? I think they were too busy doing their own auditing. So, yeah, we haven't looked at that. But you're quite right. And, I mean, it's one of the things that comes out of the Guardian article is it's pointed out that companies that are responsible for creating companies actually have to meet certain requirements. Companies House doesn't. You going and creating your company, you know, online, like I say, there's no identity check. There's no validation done there. Yet, if you were a private entity doing it, you would be expected to do these things, and so there's kind of a two-tier system almost in operation. So yeah, no, I'm sure there are you know, maybe they're more advanced. The nice thing about this is because the data only started becoming available in 2016, so the first full year of data was only available like July, August 2017, and we started this project last year.
You mentioned lobbying with other countries. The question is how likely you see something like Companies House in other EU countries, and how possible would be EU regulations?
So my understanding is that there is significant progress with other EU countries about this concept. I'm not involved. So I've been told by Global Witness that that's where they've been doing some of their lobbying and their work, and that there is definitely momentum building that stuff is going to happen. Quite in what form and whether it's a central required regulation comes in rather than, I think at the moment it's individual countries choosing to do it rather than anybody requiring this level of transparency in ownership data.
Let's thank Adam one more time.